welcome to the Change Society podcast. Today we've got Angie Main. Brilliant to have you here. And also Adrian Stallon, always a pleasure.
Hi.
Now, I've been threatening to have a good conversation with Angie and Adrian for best part of 2 years, 18 months now. And Angie's been a big supporter of what we do for many years and has worked with some of our clients doing servant leadership, sort of coaching, a big advocate of servant leadership, a real expert in that field. And I heard the other day from someone who will remain anonymous, the comment, servant leadership doesn't work during the bad times. So servant leadership doesn't work in an economic crisis and in a recession. And I thought we've got to do this talk. So it'll be a bit informal. We're going to shoot the breeze a bit. But before we do that, let's do some light introductions. So Angie, do you want to just introduce who you are, what you do, and your claim to fame?
Yeah, so I'm Angie, as Bill. Thanks for having me today. So I'm dialed in from Northumberland, so I live up on the northeast coast. And I suppose I've got one of those things that we now call a portfolio career. So as well as consulting around organisational development and leadership, I run a craft ale bar and a couple of other things as well. So 20 odd years in financial services, set up by myself 7 years ago. And fundamentally, I help teams and leaders think about the behavioural aspect of what they're doing and fundamentally how they manage themselves and lead others. So sometimes that's servant leadership, sometimes it's strengths coaching, and more often than not, a little sprinkling of agile ways of working in there. So that's me.
Wow. Adrian.
So hi, my name is Adrian Stallon. I'm the Chief Strategic Coach at S&S, sit on the leadership team. My background's been in big delivery through many different industries. I started off in Johnson & Johnson, working with infectious diseases, kind of topical for the moment, but working with hepatitis and HIV and kind of cut my teeth on projects at that point, developing new blood tests which were more accurate and faster. Wanted to take those skills into retail and other places. So retail was the antithesis of a highly regulated medical market, but great in its own way. The pace of change was just relentless. Strategy was what's happening at the weekend, but it was great fun. And then moved on through doing bigger programs and transformational programs and people change through telco, through financial services, through publishing, etc. Yeah, got a lot into the people change side. Got to learn. I had a fantastic manager once who absolutely was a servant leader, who was a natural coach, and I got into my coaching skills there and became an executive coach on the back of that. And to say, yeah, my career has always been client side, working at the coalface, trying to help organisations and leadership teams transform and go on the change journey.
Awesome. So to kick things off, just got quite a simple question. Feel free for someone to step forward first, but what is servant leadership? What would you say is the simplest explanation of what it is and what it does?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, it's not a new concept, is it? It's been around for a long time. It's certainly having its day. I mean, I draw it as a set of scales, as a balance, and I think fundamentally it's a way of operating, thinking and working where you're equally trying to balance a concern for results and relationships, understanding that sometimes you might need to kind of tip in another direction. I mean, sometimes it's quite simply called thinking about we before me. It's about, wanting to serve your team and make sure that you're meeting their legitimate needs. But fundamentally, I try and think of it as that balance. It's not, being a soft touch. It's about making sure that you're really thinking and balancing the management side of leadership with leading your people.
I think that's great. Yeah, that's a great great description. I think for me, it's a really interesting term, and I've seen lots of organisations who actually don't like it. They don't like the servant part of it. I think they forget the fact that there's leadership on the back end. But I guess for me, it's a little bit about understanding your role as a leader as an attribute rather than a position. And when you think about leadership as an attribute, we start to think about how we can serve others and the team beneath us. So, I guess my metaphor for this maybe is the sort of the coach for the sports team. Right. In actual fact, he's trying to make he or she is trying to make the best environment, trying to give the right kind of enthusiasm and support to those people so that they work together as a team, they can be the best they can be. And ultimately, that coach has to let them go and they have to go out and play the game. And at that point, you let go completely. It's not about you. It's about the team, and they win or they lose as a team. And sometimes your job is to go, great, we won. How do we train for the next one? Because, just because you've won doesn't mean that's the end of it. I've never worked with an athlete who's gone, I've got a gold medal. I can stop training now. It's absolutely, you've got to defend that position. The next competition is going to be harder. So how do you go back out there again? Or actually, if they've lost, how do you pick them back up again? How do you pick them back up and help them mobilize? So it's less about you. It's about how you help the rest of the team be the best they can be and perform at the best they can ever perform.
I think you make a really interesting point there, Adrian, about it's not about me, it's about us. I think servant leadership, when it works, 'cause it doesn't always work, and we can talk about why that is. When it works, it delivers something that keeps us as employees, as employers, as partners, coaches, the whole kind of thing, awake at night. It delivers trust. Because, when you coach and empower people and you distribute power and you distribute decision making, along with that, you get trust. And, I thought it was really interesting that before COVID came along, there's a really interesting study. I'm sure most people that have listened to this have kind of read it or heard of it. 500 CEOs were asked the kind of question, what's keeping you awake at night? And this was before COVID. And the overpowering answer was lack of trust in our organization, lack of trust in our products and our people, and lack of trust, in our employee base. And I think servant leadership, well, I know because I see it, it delivers trust. And, if you believe in the, profit chain, what does that then in turn deliver? It delivers performance and bottom line performance. Yeah. So, it's not soft and fluffy stuff, kind of, which is why I like it. I like performance. I like things that deliver. I like efficiency. And I think if you can do that by being, a great leader and a coach, why would you not adopt that?
Yeah.
Is that a published study?
Yeah, I'll find it for you and send it to you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's lots of studies that say that that great leaders and great coaches, managers as coaches, get better engagement and performance out of their teams, and that fundamentally hits the bottom line. I mean, the links are there, and it's been known for years and years and years. And that's the great thing, isn't it, Angie? The point that we look at all these HR initiatives around employee engagement. You know what? If your leaders are acting in the right way, employee engagement comes for free.
Yeah, it does.
Right? It absolutely comes for free. You don't have to spend money on it. It's just, it's been proven time and time again that the most effective coaches, most effective managers have the most engaged employees. There's a direct correlation between the two.
What I'm going to make sure I do before we end today is wave a few books in front of the screen, because, I'm a complete nerd. And I do lots of work on strengths, intellection's up there for me. And I've got a groaning bookshelf. So remind me, Pat, before we finish, I've got 4 books I want to share with you guys and whoever's listening today. But one of them is, the Gallup book from last year called It's the Manager's Fault. And that is packed full of quantitative information that Adrian points out around, better engaged teams delivering the goods, and we know that, 70% of the gap in employee engagement is directly attributable to your leader. So, if they've not got your back, and I'm not an expert on psychological safety, but I was watching Amy Edmondson just refreshing the whole argument for psychological safety the other day. If you've not got people's back, if you don't like the people that work for you, if you don't care for them, and that's, again, not soft and fluffy stuff. If you're not doing that stuff, if you don't trust people, if you don't have systems, processes and procedures for decision making, for speed, for reflection, for learning, you're kind of dead in the water. So, this is why servant leadership is having its day. I've never been busier, because people realize that all the other leadership approaches, yeah, you get a quick buck, you get a quick win, they're not sustainable, and they don't deliver trust when your people are not under your nose.
Yeah. There's actually a series, I don't know if you guys have got Apple TV Plus at the moment, but there's a series called Ted Lasso. And it's about an American football coach, and he gets drafted, he gets pulled over to help out an English football team. And it is brilliant because they're incredibly dysfunctional. But he's the most optimistic guy, nicest guy you're ever going to come across. You know, first thing he does is write out "believe" on a big piece of paper and sticks it above the coach's, office. And it's this story of how one by one he tackles these characters in helping them just lift them up. And one of them is the captain, and he's quite dysfunctional to say the least. But he helps him realize that actually his role is quite different to the one he thinks it is. And he helps him through that journey. There's another one who's a sort of a self-orientated, he's the star of the team, but he's a one-man band. He's not a team player, so he really helps him. He's got a guy who does the kit bags, and he ends up, it's the first person he talks to, and he calls him by his name, and the guy's like, "You've remembered my name from one day to the next," But it just elevates all of these people bit by bit across the series until the point where they get towards the end, this big sort of match. I won't spoil the end bit. It's a great kind of example of servant leadership. I really enjoyed it. It's good fun comedy.
Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso, yeah. It's on Apple TV Plus.
So you'll have to just do a podcast on what people have been watching and reading during lockdown.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So why isn't it more prevalent then in the corporate world?
Well, do you know, Pat, I actually think it is, but to Adrian's point, a lot of people are really averse to calling it servant leadership because they think it means servitude or being servile. So I think, I mean, with a lot of clients, and when I look at their values, I think about Diageo, when I, looked at their values and I used those values week in, week out, always made sure that they were pasted into, every PowerPoint, every webcast, every kind of session, and if I went through those with a highlighter, which in fact I did, 90% of the things that were written in their values were servant leadership. We coach others, we treat each other with respect, we distribute power and decision making, stuff on agility, stuff on production, stuff around making decisions, about great prioritization, and whichever company I go in and help or collaborate with or learn from myself, I generally find there's more than a sprinkling of servant leadership in their values, because it's just good people management. It makes sense, it's common sense. But why are some of the key aspects of servant leadership more prevalent? Because they're bloody hard work. Because a lot of senior leaders don't want to put the spade work in to learn to be good coaches. Still even now, and think about this yourselves and maybe the people that are listening to this, how disciplined are you around working on your listening and coaching? How good are you at retrospection and reflection? Do you know what your strengths are? How good are you at celebrating success and being positive? All of those things are hard work. And it's easier sometimes to refer to type, isn't it? And be command and control, issue your orders, and keep yourself in that place of kind of false ego. It's really hard to suddenly say, I don't know, I'm going to learn. And lots of organisations don't make provision for that. I still think, I mostly work in the UK and Europe. I just see lots of organisations, from tiny SMEs to big globals, that just do not put time aside for learning and reflection. And you are not going to change, and you are not going to do the hard stuff around servant leadership unless you've got that discipline. It's easy just to coast along doing what you've always done, but doing what you've always done is not going to get you where you need to be. So I'm amazed and humbled, and it's great because it kind of keeps me in work. The number of leaders that don't coach, that can't coach, that don't know what it is, that can't prioritize, that can't create alignment, that don't know what an outcome is. We're still training and coaching people in outdated models of managing themselves and leading others. And then I think there's some myths about it, that it's all hippie shit, that it's all fluffy stuff and tree hugging, and it's not. Just Google Ken Blanchard, or, Herb Kelleher, who ran Southwest, who's, the poster boy for servant leadership, and look how they ran their businesses. There's nothing soft about them. Herb Kelleher at Southwest, airlines, aviation, a really tough industry. The first time, and this is a bit of urban myth in this, so I might be a bit misquoting some of the time frames, but they'd had quarter on quarter success for several years, and they got a profit warning. They thought they weren't going to come in with a profit one quarter, and that meant that his people wouldn't get a bonus. So, he wrote out to his employee base and said, I need everybody to give me an idea to save $1, to save $10. We can collectively save some money, and we can, stay in the black. I can pay you guys a bonus, and I really want to do that. Not only did he get a load of ideas, he then, this is the interesting bit, because, loads of idea schemes get loads of responses, don't they? He then, empowered people to put those changes and suggestions in place, and they had their best quarter ever. That's quite a brave thing to do, and time consuming. So rather than sitting in your office doing, transactional stuff and, feeding your ego, to put the time in and to have systems and processes and an environment where you really are listening to people and acting on it, takes an effort. And a lot of people are just too lazy to do it. Sounds harsh, but they're just too lazy to change.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with you. I think we talked earlier about the sometimes having to teach the hygiene things, the stuff that's, maybe quite simple, but, I do wonder if there's a clarity problem, right? So we have a culture of busyness, right? So it's much more, it's much easier to get in my back-to-back meetings all day and pretend I'm doing, a decent job, rather than that time to reflect, that time to think out, sit out and think strategically, to maybe think about what's really going on from a systems point of view and the people within that system. I'll give you an example. We worked with a leadership team at a bank recently, and we were helping them take their values, right? So it's great to have values on the wall, but do we really live them, right? So partly, number one, do we understand what that value really means? Because it's easy to walk past and go, yeah, I agree with that. But we all have our own interpretation of that, because we haven't really got it down to an unequivocal level. So we helped them work with a couple of their key words they were talking about. New CEO had come in, and one of the words was servant leadership that he'd been talking about. And it was fascinating trying to get from a macro statement like servant leadership down to a team of his leadership going, okay, what's that really mean? What would that mean as an observable behavior?
How do I see it? How do I smell it? How do I see you doing it? If I prod you, what happens?
Exactly.
How does it manifest itself?
Exactly. And what they discovered was, first of all, they all have a different view of it. He came out of that session going, you know what? I've talked about servant leadership since I've walked in here into this organization, and I realized I haven't explained what I meant. Right. So I do think sometimes there's a lack of clarity, and sometimes, like you say, because we're all busy, because we're focused on the bottom line, because we're focused on, whether we're going to get a bonus at the end of the year, we don't take the reflection time, we don't take the study time, right? Some of this thing, the reason you know a lot about servant leadership is you studied it, right? You've taken time out to go, what does it really mean? I believe I may have encountered a servant leader at some point in my career, and that's felt a little bit different and amazing. I'd like to learn about this and then learn how to coach and dedicate some time to that and reflection. And I think we've just ended up sometimes in a cycle where we're busy but not doing the right things.
Well, yeah, and being really honest, why did I become interested in servant leadership? Because 10, 12 years ago, I was just about to hit 40. I was working, it's hard to believe, I know. I was working, 70 hours a week. Had this big job in financial services, loved it, lots of A-type behavior, throw in kind of activator, intellection, input, just chomping up work. And, I started to get the feedback from my team that it was great working for me. It was a lot of tough love. I was a great coach, but I was burning people out. I was getting less favourable feedback from home. I was never at home. My ego was taking over. I thought it was invincible, and I just started to think, right, okay, what am I going to be like as a leader in 10 years' time? Because I'm kind of sinking. I remember having a stress meltdown on a ferry to the Isle of Wight on a family holiday, just thinking I can't carry on being this type of leader. I'd been taught and coached to be a certain type of leader in the 80s, and particularly as a woman, to be quite combative, to be, you know, a hard negotiator, to, you know, work super hard, and, you know, all the, you know, kind of things that we were taught to be as leaders in kind of the 80s. And I found servant leadership as a model. And, you know, exactly as you said, Adrian, I read the stuff and thought, I've seen this in some of the best people I've worked with and who have led me, and I would like to be like this, you know. And 10 years on, I'm nowhere near the finished article. And I'm glad I had that kind of humility check to go, I ain't the bee's knees. I'm getting lots of stuff delivered, but am I doing it in the right way? And is this the right model? And I don't think that we help our teams around us to really think about how are they working? What are they doing? What is right for them and their people? And I think another reason that servant leadership is having its day is part of that kind of whole diversity debate. You know, we're getting a lot better at encouraging and allowing people to be more of themselves at work. I don't think we're all being ourselves at work. And, you know, one of the books I'm going to show you is kind of on that topic. But I think there's definitely a trend towards being your whole self at work, being different. And again, teams realizing that groupthink and a room full of middle-aged white men is not the way to be. You know, we need different experiences. And that's not a quota of people, that's a quota of different views, experiences, backgrounds, thoughts, you know, predispositions. So I think servant leadership is realizing there are lots of different ways, you know, to work. And then you've got the whole millennial thing. You know, they're not evil, they're fabulous, our millennials, but, you know, they are demanding that we work in a different way. So I think there's lots of forces that are demanding that servant leadership be looked at, you know, really, really carefully. And, you know, I actually don't care if people do 50% of servant leadership. You know, I've been at it for 10 or 12 years and I'm nowhere near where I need to be. Just do one or two things from, you know, the servant leadership ethos. Yeah. Just learn to listen better, focus on trust, you know, think about some of the aspects that are right for you and your team, you know, just have a go at it. You know, we're not going to issue a certificate if you get it all right. Just make a start, you know, do something a bit different.
Yeah, see what happens.
I think we talked about the catalyst for this conversation around servant leadership doesn't work in a downturn. So if we put the frame around that downturn, it is pandemic, whole workforce now on the whole working remotely. You know, that's tough, right, for any leader, you know, who's been used to going into a HQ, traveling around the world, you know, going around different branches or divisions or whatever it might be, and having that human interaction. And all of a sudden, you know, I faced it as well. You've overnight, you're a remote leader, and, you know, I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of the statement, but I think it'd be worth revisiting around servant leadership with distributed workforces, servant leadership, you know, with remote working. You know, can you see why some leaders might be struggling with that, and what's your sort of view on it and your advice to them?
I think you know, the pandemic, and, you know, is forcing people to, you know, really think about what's working for them as a leader. And if you've got to be in front of people's faces, pointing at them and tapping a notepad to get work done, then you're not being particularly effective. And if you've got to be, you know, standing behind your people, directing them all the time, then that's not kind of success. So I think it's forcing a lot of people to think, ooh, you know, here am I sat in my box room study. Am I still important? I'm not in my sexy office. I'm not in my corporate wear, thank goodness. You know, I'm not stomping around looking important, you know. Service staff aren't bringing me my tea. I'm not flying anywhere feeling important. So I think people are having a real moment of humility, and just, you know, to Adrian's point, realizing that the old tropes of leadership aren't going to serve them. You know, there are two reasons. There are two kind of factors for me to remote working, why it works. And again, there's a really kind of good study on this, and I wrote it down so I didn't kind of forget it. So, you know, remote teams, distributed teams, virtual teams, whatever you want to call it, there's lots of different language, but people that aren't in the same room all the time, you know, they need two things to work. And if they exist, then you're generally going to succeed. The first one is freedom and autonomy. You've got to have the space to be able to get the work done. Of course, you need guardrails, you need alignment, you need your rules, your standards, your values, as Adrian said. How do we work around here? But people within those guardrails need to be able to work in a way that kind of suits themselves. And distributed teams, that naturally supports that statement. But the other one is a sense of connection and belonging, and that's harder to do if you're in a distributed team. So the role of the leader is to keep saying, a bit like, the NASA kind of statement, we're all here to put a man on the moon, we're all here to do this. What's that thing that you're doing today that really contributes to a great outcome, or a vision or a goal for this team or this function? You've got to keep pulling people back to that. And back to the psychological safety thing, interestingly, there's a sense that actually there are higher instances of psychological safety at the minute. Lots of leaders have stood up and are really showing care for their workplace. But what does that mean in terms of results and bottom line? How are you, through giving people freedom and supporting them, actually getting better outcomes? So I think people are struggling working in distributed ways for all sorts of reasons. Some of those are a bit more negative because they're used to the tropes and the pat on the back of being a leader. And then some teams just do not have practice of trusting, of coaching, of collaboration, simple collaboration, of problem solving, not really having a framework for even what problem solving looks like. So when a problem arises, well, how do we tackle that? Who makes the decision? Who needs to be involved? What are our systems for flowing information and decisions around this organisation? And again, lots of teams that I work with, I'm doing quite basic stuff. What's your communication cadence? How often do you meet and for what reason? Are you making the most of meetings and time together? Do you know what collaboration is? Because it's not coordination and it's not cooperation. Do we understand that problem solving is two parts of the brain: creativity, brainstorming, and then evaluation? So there's lots of stuff about being a leader that we think is just like rolling off a log, and it's a behavioural or charisma thing. Actually, a lot of it are skills and practices and systems that we need to learn and practice. And again, I just think we've not invested in that for people. I'm amazed in the amount of leaders and people like ourselves that wouldn't even know what systems thinking is, wouldn't even know what continuous improvement looks like, wouldn't understand what collaboration looks like, don't know the strengths of their people. We've been so stuck in kind of delivery and busyness. That's a fabulous point from Adrian. We've weighed our value up in how busy we are. I think we just got to really step back and think, we're now, a distributed team, and some people aren't. Some people are still going into hospitals and retail environments and toughing it out day to day. But, what are we doing to make sure that we can survive when business feels different? And then the other part is, and I'm hearing a lot less of this, I'm not hearing that many leaders talk about, well, when this ends, because it will, what does that mean? I think, a lot of us are stuck in the day-to-day, and we're not thinking about, well, when we go through this, when we get through it, what does next summer, what does 2022 hold for us? And I would really hope that some leaders start kind of putting their efforts, towards that, thinking about, well, what's not just what the survival is, but how do we thrive? How do we grow? What's next for us? What have we learned? I think a lot of people are just trying to get through the day, and, maybe servant leadership can, give us some clues as to kind of how we get through it. But yeah, I mean, back to my point, I think, there are two factors there for remote teams succeeding: that, sense of protecting autonomy and freedom, allowing people to work in a way that suits them, that delivers a good outcome, and then making sure that you're creating alignment and belonging. Lots of people are suffering from, fear of missing out, or even paranoia if they're not on every single meeting. People seem to be in more meetings than ever. People are packing their day out with Zoom and Teams and not even having a wee break in the middle, let alone, reflecting on what they're going to say, what they learn. People just seem to be on this kind of, I fill my day with Zoom, that's what good looks like, I'm busy. But actually, no, go for a walk for 2 hours and think about, imagine we've got a vaccine this time next year. What do you want your business to be? What do you dream for your customers, clients, and people?
That's great. I think first 2 or 3 weeks, we even found that, didn't we, Adrian? We were just on even still, you know, most of them were warranted, but I remember Adrian and I had one at the end of the day, and we just looked at each other and went, "You don't look right," and I was like, "I don't look right." And we're just like, do you know what? We've just got to look at, you know, look at all that operational stuff we've just accrued over the last year from all the growth we've been going through. Like, that's duplication, that's not needed, that's like, you know, where can we rip it out and get really streamlined, and then just keep focused on the end result of what we want this business to be. And it's difficult to do that when you've got threat rigidity facing you. But I think one of the things I'm hearing which really resonates, and you know, I've been fallible to this too, which is, you know, as a leader or as executive entrepreneur, or what you're doing, you can't transform yourself if you're backed up. And that's a great quote from Dan Sullivan, you might have heard of, from Strategic Coach. So I joined that 3 months ago to reclaim more of my time, to get more disciplined around focus days, buffer days, and trying to be a better leader. And actually, a lot of that is by not being stressed or not being backed up morning, noon and night, and not actually even having any time to following through on some of the things that I've agreed to do. Because by the time you get to 8, you know, 7, 8, 9 or whatever it is, you're not good for anything apart from eating your tea, you're goofing out on a half an hour of television and then going to bed and
eating badly. And I know you guys are really into the kind of whole well-being thing, looking after yourselves, you know, being fit. It's vital. I think we just so easily, and I definitely was doing this, we fall into this trap of thing. We've got to be a hero leader. We've got to be all things to all people. We've got to have all the answers. We've got to work the longest, work the hardest, be the smartest. And you know, that was a really hard lesson for me. I'm not saying I still haven't got a horrendous ego, but you know, I'm just trying to realize that I should be really the most dispensable person on the team. And work towards that.
Yeah, I think the pandemic's been really interesting, isn't it? There's been, we've heard some horror stories. I mean, companies where their culture has been ripped apart on the back of this. Some that have managed to sort of scoot through, maybe a little bit bruised from a cultural point of view. There's a saying which I like to quote a lot, and it's the true values of an organisation are demonstrated by how your leaders act in a crisis.
Yeah.
And I thought this is great. I think just as lockdown did, I made this statement on LinkedIn, and I went, you know, everyone's watching, and it was one of those things where everyone's like, and you know, it's very true that you resort to type at that point, right? And we made mistakes. We, you know, there was one point where we traded clarity for intensity. Right, we went for the intensity route, and there was a moment where we just lost everyone. Right, it's just people are. It's like we had to take a step backwards and sort of pivot slightly and just help bring the clarity back. But I think it's been really tough. Can it work? Can servant leadership work in those real crisis times? I think it absolutely can, and it's probably your best way out.
It's the only way out.
Yeah.
It's the only way out. I mean, if you look at, you know, the VUCA matrix, and I'll send it to you guys. And I did some work on this a couple of years ago, thinking about the skills that we need to navigate fundamentally really complex situations. And what do you need? You need the skill and the will to collaborate. I mean, there's been, you know, Nobel Prize announcements today. They're all collaborations. You know, they're all people that are collaborating. We're only going to collaborate our way out of COVID. It's not suddenly going to come to one person. You know, it's going to be teams of people cross discipline, having those moments. So, you know, complexity requires collaboration and experimentation. People don't like that word. I think it's kind of, again, fluffy and wasteful. But, you know, experimentation is absolutely vital. Trying things quickly, discarding them quickly, you know, knowing if you're not right, building trust. We've talked about that loads today. Complexity, people have got to know that they've got your backs, or they're not going to make the silly suggestion, not going to go the extra mile, you're not going to discover. And you've got to be accessible. You know, that's why, you know, fantastic, you know, officers, majors, whatever. I don't really do military talk. I know there are lots of agencies that are full of ex-military guys, but, you know, that's why the forces that succeed have got those officers at the front line. They're there, they're seeing what's happening. They're literally, that's how they're kind of turning the ship around. And then you've got to create alignment. What's this about? What are we trying to do? Reminding people every single day. And, you know, I'm not sure of luckily, teams that, you know, want to work with me during this crisis are so key on keeping their people aligned and are frightened witless and don't know what they're doing and showing real humility, and that is just working brilliantly for them. I think it's the only way out. You know, a model that says let's balance relationships with results. It's not about, you know, being fluffy. Let's think about how we align both of those, and sometimes they need to tip either way. A model that distributes decision making and power, fabulous if you're a distributed model. A team that's, you know, as interested in making tactical small choices as strategic choices. You know, why would you not want to go there? And I'm sure with a little bit of work, people will find that there are plenty of big thriving organisations out there that have more than a sprinkling of servant leadership in them. It's not called it on their leadership onboarding program. HR still don't like the term servant leadership for some reason. You know, there's lots of it in really good organisations. You know, leaders like this that listen, coach, make difference, but you know that they're kind of in the minority. We've just got to grow those people. I think it's the only way out. I mean, how else are you going to pay your way out of this? Command your way out of this?
Yeah.
People are the answer. People are the answer to this. All the answers are there in our people. We've got to get them out.
Yeah.
So clue time. I'm sure there'll be loads of people listening to this thinking, yeah, I want to know more, I want to read more. What books are you going to recommend? What clues, what signposts can we...
Okay. Well, the first thing is, so I'm as busy as ever. So, you know, never a spare moment in lockdown. So I put my guide to servant leadership on my website. So I've refreshed it with the help of Base 8. So I've put my condensed guide to servant leadership in there. So, you know, if people are like what they're kind of hearing today, look at the page that's all about servant leader qualities. You know, so there are 8 skills and behaviours in there, practical things that you can learn. So also on the website, I've put each of those individual skill guides. So you can have a look at those. You can rate yourself, you know, do you rock or are you pants, with some ideas in the middle. The other one that I would offer is that's maybe less explicitly around servant leadership is this really good new book called The Remote Facilitator's Pocket Guide, which is good. We'll make sure we kind of get these authors down, Kirsten Clacy and J. Alan Morris. So this is Berwick Kohler Publications. So practical ways of actually facilitating when your team's not in the same room. And again, I read through this and I went, oh God, it's ages since I did that. Oh, I haven't done that for ages. So really, really good. This is a good one. I mean, you know, I'm a fairly strident feminist. So here's a good one. This is called Lift as You Climb. And again, going into the kind of final quarter of my career, I'm really thinking more and more on how I can give younger women around me a kind of, you know, a leg up and some help. And there's some stuff in here for the boys too as well. So just, you know, practical ways that you can grow trust and psychological safety in your female employee base who are the least engaged and employed. And actually Black and Hispanic women are the least empowered, engaged of all employee segments. So, you know, if you want to do a bit of targeting in that area and really think about how you're supporting women. And then the other book I would offer is Solutions Focus, which I'm sure Adrian will know. So practical side of coaching, making coaching and change simple. With a nice testimonial from Sir John Whitmore on there. You know, we sometimes, again, think coaching's all fluffy shit, don't we? Oh, how are you feeling? And blah, blah, blah. Actually, what's your goal? How are we going to get there? How will we know when we've got there? You know, so maybe even some stuff on, you know, I've been talking quite a lot about coaching kata over the last 6 months, you know, short 15-minute coaching interventions. What's the goal? What can you try? How did it work? And then, of course, you know, we're in the 50th year of Robert Greenleaf's Servant Leadership book. I won't reach up and get it. It's on the top shelf in front of me. It won't be hard to find it. So it's 50 years of servant leadership this year. So Robert Greenleaf's original book on servant leadership, you know, is the daddy, but it will fundamentally talk about wanting in your heart and your head to serve people, to be the kind of leader that sets the goal, gives people the space, and says thank you at the end. And then finally, again, without getting to kind of too politicized, I reread James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time. So written in 1962, this is a book around how do we end systemic racism. And quite shocking that, you know, nearly 60 years on, this book reads like it was written yesterday. And as a, you know, white, moving towards middle class, fairly entitled woman, I've been pretty ignorant in the whole Bain piece. So I've just been kind of reading up on what I can do to educate myself and not be overtly part of the problem. So there are a few things I've been reading, and you know the website, so www.belbeck.co.uk for loads of freebies on servant leadership.
A manager's fault.
Right, I will reach up and get that for you then. Hold on.
To remind you, so.
Here we go. Yes, here we go. Oh, there we go. You're getting a bit close with the jumper. Right. Glamorous jumper. It's a Gallup book. It's The Manager's Fault.
Great.
Really, really good. Packed full of just really, really fantastic stuff. It's one of those books I really wish I'd written. It's just so fantastic, but you know, you can just, it's just so full of quantitative stuff. And actually, I've been going back to the Gallup Q12, and again, just reminding remote teams of, you know, the 12 kind of indicators of team success. And then finally, while I was up there, I got the Robert Greenleaf book, so Servant Leadership, 50th year. So yeah, I mean, I think, you know, in kind of summary for me, I kind of think it's the only choice to get us out of this. I think it's having its day, but you know, fundamentally with servant leadership, how do you turn common sense into common practice? And sadly, it's just through the work. There's no silver bullet. You can't bring an agency in or a me to wave a wand and give you a few handouts. You've really got to want to do it, and that's why it sometimes doesn't work, because some organizations don't want to give up power, some people don't want to give up power, some people don't or don't have the capacity to learn and change, and that's where it really fails.
Fascinating. And Adrian, any closing thoughts from your good self?
Yeah, I think for me, servant leadership is leadership 2.0, right? It's the next level, right? If you want to be good as a leader or a manager, get to the next level, right? It's not about those things you thought it was. It's not weak. It's not if you studied it, you'd understand that actually, you know, you talked about tough love. There's an element of tough love to it. I mean, even Robert Greenleaf said servant leadership always empathizes. It always accepts the person, but sometimes refuses to accept some of the person's effort or performance as good enough. That's okay as a servant leader as well. But the way in which you handle that may be quite different to the way you'd handle that in a command and control world. So it's you know, some of the best leaders I've ever worked with who were servant leaders were also tough leaders. They set really high expectations. They helped you push yourself, and I accelerated my career on the back of a servant leader, absolutely, because his expectations were so far. He had such confidence in me. Gave such support and coaching, but really high expectations of what I was possible, and it absolutely accelerated my career on the back of it. So I'm a massive fan of it. It's not a weak term. It's as I say, it's if you don't think you're doing servant leadership yet, then this is the next level of leadership you need to think about. And yes, you need to study it. I'm sorry if you're someone who doesn't read books, or well, sorry, you're gonna have to knuckle down and just get in there and study. But all the data's there. We know that we can get better engaged teams who can hit the bottom line harder, and it's an obvious choice, and it's where management and leadership needs to go.
Nice summary.
That's brilliant. I have to say, I mean, Adrian, you do always inspire me to raise my game, but Angie, you definitely inspired me to raise my game, man. I think there's been some fantastic things that have been covered here, and I really appreciate all the signposts and strong clues for everyone who's going to be listening to this to follow after, me included. So, Angie, I hope to see you in the Ink Spot at some point.
Yes,
fabulous
there,
and
beer by the sea, delivering beer by the sea.
Just watch with interest on Twitter, and I'm sure we'll speak very soon. And Adrian, thanks as always. It's been a great chat. Really, really enjoyed it. Have a great day.
See you later, guys.